In this episode we are looking at tracking, which is how you stick stuff to other stuff. So we're still working on Jeff Smith's Sidekicked movie, where we've seen our heroes get shot, but we haven't seen who shoots them.
Spoil it. So
what we've got here, if you just scrub back and forth on the timeline, you'll see we've got a gun and we've got, some sort of power ring. So what we want to do is add an effect to these weapons to see them fly out. So yeah, we could use beam and lens flares, but we've done those. So this seems like a great opportunity to show you how to do some tracking. Now, tracking is the process of basically determining the position, the scale, the rotation, any of these properties that we can find and applying them onto the video. So if you scrub along until we can see the guy's ring, and there's no way to say that safely.
It's just here.
No, let's go until we get a really sharp image of it. Doesn't matter if it's halfway through the shot.
So like that. Oh, there.
Perfect. Right, so we're going to start using tracking. First thing that we need to do, though, is any of this data that we collect, we're going to need to apply to something. So go to Layer, New, Null Object. And that creates an invisible layer, but it's got position and it's got rotation data, which is really useful for us. And we can use things, we can link things to it. So now that we've done that, make sure you're selected back on the Sidekicks layer. And then go to Window, Tracker. Now there's loads of different ways of doing video tracking in After Effects. We're not going to get into some of the more complicated ones. We're going to stick to the basics here. I think that's just safe and we can build up, and if we end up needing to, we could always do a later video. So what we want to do is track motion. If you click on that track motion button, and as you can see, we've got a checkbox checked for position. We're not going to worry this time about tracking the rotation or the scale, so we'll just stick to the one track point for this easy option. And as you can see, you've just got the mouse over it there. We've got motion target null 1. So this will always pick the top layer in the comp, but you can edit the target to pick a different layer if you needed to. We've only got the 2 layers, so that's fine. So, can you see in the very middle of the screen something labeled track point 1?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you go and grab the outer box and just make it a bit bigger? Yeah, exactly like that, and just click and drag. Okay, and then do the same for the inner box. And zoom in a moment, just so we can sort of see these in more detail. The outer box is the section of the whole video that After Effects is going to look for whatever is determined inside the inner box. So ideally, if we move this over onto the ring now, if you click and you can just drag it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it gives you kind of a zoom in option.
Yeah.
Now, so if you scroll to zoom in again, okay, so the cross is the actual attachment point. That's got the position data on it. So that's what's going to attach. So you don't have to technically have it inside the boxes, but that's for later and more complicated. So what we want to do is make the inner box sort of cover the ring, probably the gold band as well as the blue. Something like that, yeah. So we've got some nice contrasts and things going on. If you just very briefly click on the options in the track panel. We're going to use the built-in tracker. Potentially you could have bought another one and had that available there. And we're going to track off the luminance values. We could track off the red, green, blue values or the saturation ones. Luminance works most often, and that's why it's the default. But it might be that you've got 2 things of equal brightness that are causing tracking problems. So you could then vary it and see which one works best. We've got our attach point, which is more or less in the middle of the ring. It's not quite exactly in there, but we've got the box. And After Effects is going to look for that pattern of that blue circle with the white dot at the top and the gold band around it. Mm-hmm. It's going to look for that pattern inside the outer box. So if he moves his hand really, really quickly from one frame to the next and that is no longer in there, After Effects will lose track. In fact, After Effects will lose track more often than it won't. The big takeaway from tracking, you should always shoot for tracking. And you want to try to make sure that what you're tracking is always in frame. Down in the bottom corner, we've got our Analyze buttons. So let's just go for 1 frame forward for now. Let's see if After Effects is recognizing what we're tracking. Yeah, and again. Yeah, and again. And yeah, it seems to be holding. Now, the higher quality video you use, so if you're shooting in 4K, the easier time you're going to have. If you're shooting in SD, tracking is almost impossible. So now that After Effects clearly knows what it's doing, you can go ahead and press the play button. So now After Effects is going more than one frame at a time. It's analyzing it. There's always the possibility it could lose track, at which point you'll see it drift off. And from bitter experience, I know that it's probably worth pressing stop now. And if you hit the U key, what that does is when we press stop, After Effects dumps all of that data into the position data on the tracking system. He's very good though. He holds his hand quite still.
He does.
What's happened there is his hand's moved. It's probably just moved out of the outer box, and After Effects has lost the track. So what we can do is we can manually reconnect the track. If you use the page up key, you will go one frame back. And then just zoom in or move the box until it's back around the ring. What you could do at this point is make the boxes more vertical, so After Effects is looking in a larger space. And see how that works if you analyze one frame forward. And you can, if you press the space bar, that's more or less exactly what we want for the effect. So we've got all these keyframes. And now if you make sure Sidekicks is selected and then hit apply and click OK. And now if you start scrubbing through the timeline, you'll see, and if you select Null 1, it'll become even more obvious. There's our Null 1 attached quite nicely to his ring. So obviously we could put a lens flare on, we could potentially do all sorts of things. We could attach particles just for a bit of fun, just for now. With Sidekicks selected.
Yeah.
Let's search for light rays. And this just shows you a different effect you can apply. And just drag that onto Sidekicks in the timeline. But what we want to do is attach its center value to the Null 1. So if you double click on center.
On the word.
Yes. So that just opens it up. So, depending on the effect, sometimes it just opens just that, but it's opened everything up. What we're seeing is we've gone to the trouble of setting up a Null 1. Hit P to expose the position keyframes. And then click on the word position. That highlights them all. Then hold Control and tap C. And then go down to our center, and make sure we're at the first keyframe, so use the arrows on Null to jump forward, and Control and tap V. Cool. Now let's boost this up because we'll barely see it, so set intensity to 200 and actually have some fun. Should we have a little bit more fun with something different?
Okay. I want to take inspiration from 21's music video for the song Happy and put some words and symbols around him. That's what I want to do.
Well, fortunately, he's wearing a really strongly coloured blue eye mask. So I think we can get a track off that. Probably not an absolutely perfect one, but certainly good enough for our purposes here. So same drill as last time. Go to Layer, New, and create a Null Object.
Let's say they're going to appear there.
Okay. So, make sure that Act as the layer is selected. And Track Motion. If you click Track Motion now, he twists his head from side to side a little bit, which is good for our purposes. So let's also track the rotation this time. And what that does, can you see if you zoom in for a second? We've now got two tracking points. Tracking point 1 will set the position, but it will use tracking point 2 to determine how rotated anything is. So we'll put one on one eye and one on the other. And hopefully his eyes don't change position in his head. And then same as before. And if you now select Null 1, and we'll see exactly what that's looking like. Certainly for what we're wanting to do here, it's sticking to him nicely. We need some, whatever you want on here, some symbols, some words.
Okay, how do I do that?
Okay, using the text tool, click anywhere on the screen and type a word. Okay, now you see we've got a column there called parent and link in the timeline. If you click on the drop down, you can select Null 2, which is our tracked and positioned layer. And now, no matter what happens to Null 2, the position, rotation and scale data will be transferred over to the text layer. So if you hit 0, you can see what I mean. There's nothing stopping you now putting on additional layers as well and parenting them to Null 2 is in the same way.
Okay. Can I add a symbol?
Yeah, you could either draw a shape layer like we did with the circle before using the pen tool, or you could go to Font Awesome. And if you don't know what Font Awesome is, there's a video appearing right about now. You're happy with that?
I am happy. I am HAPPY.
Okay, one last example I want to show of something that's really super easy, barely an inconvenience. If you could get the ellipse mask tool selected and draw a circle, draw an ellipse covering her entire face.
Like that?
Something like that, yeah. You can turn off add now as well. So we'll set it to none. So yeah. Okay, now if you go back to Window Tracker, it's automatically detected that you've got a mask. So it's assuming that you've got some face tracking that you want to do. It's picked everything up. And so you can now start analysing this just with the play button. And cool, if you scrub back, that's After Effects done. And you can see, if you hit U on the keyboard, you can see we've now got position data for After Effects' estimate for her entire face and all her different features. And that's tracking. So we're getting closer to recreating that Korean music video with every video.